On June 22, 1941, 3,300 German tanks crossed the Soviet frontier in three massive army groups, initiating Operation Barbarossa. Within 6 months, the Red Army lost over 20,000 armored vehicles, a catastrophic hemorrhage representing more than 6 Soviet tanks destroyed for every German Panzer committed to the invasion. The disparity originated not from inferior Soviet tank designs, but from the systematic destruction of anti-tank defense networks faster than Soviet commanders could reconstitute them. The primary Soviet anti-tank weapon in 1941, the 45mm model 1937 gun, faced a fundamental ballistic inadequacy against evolving German armor. Its armor-piercing shells could penetrate only 38mm of rolled homogeneous armor at 500 meters, sufficient against early Panzer III variants with 30mm frontal plates, but ineffective against the up-armored Panzer III OSFJ entering service in March 1941 with 50mm frontal protection. Soviet gunners found their standard weapon transformed overnight from tank killer to liability, capable only of flanking shots against the most numerous German medium tanks. The mechanical problem was worse. The 45mm gun weighed 560 kilograms, requiring a 6-man crew and horse-drawn limber for displacement. German armored spearheads advancing 50 to 70 kilometers daily moved at velocities that rendered static defensive positioning obsolete within hours. Panzer divisions bypassed strong points, leaving towed guns stranded in defensive lines that no longer corresponded with actual frontage. The Soviet doctrine distributed anti-tank weapons evenly across sector boundaries, a pattern catastrophically unsuited to containing breakthroughs that penetrated 15 to 20 kilometers deep before swinging north or south to complete encirclements. The twin pockets at Minsk eliminated approximately 420,000 Soviet troops by July 9, 1941, including dozens of anti-tank battalions whose guns remained hitched to transport vehicles when the trap closed. At Kiev, 665,000 soldiers surrendered in September, the Wehrmacht capturing 884 tanks and 3,718 artillery pieces, weapons abandoned when fuel exhaustion immobilized their tractors. German Panzer Gruppe II reported encountering only minimal organized anti-tank resistance during the advance from Smolensk to Bryansk, despite Soviet defensive preparations beginning in August. If you're interested in how wars are actually decided by logistics, math, weapons, and doctrine, subscribe now and turn on notifications. Let's continue. Vasily Degtyaryov received the design brief at his Kovrov workshop in the early fall of 1941, weeks after the Kiev encirclement closed. The Soviet government had formally adopted the 14.5mm anti-tank rifle concept on August 29th, commissioning both Degtyaryov and Sergei Simonov to develop competing designs simultaneously, a measure of how desperate the situation had become. The specifications arrived on a single sheet. Create a man-portable armor killer capable of defeating 40mm of rolled homogeneous steel at 100 meters, deliverable within 30 calendar days. The 57-year-old designer reached for the 14.5 by 114mm cartridge already sitting on his bench, the heavy machine gun round that would define his solution before he drew a single line. Its 64-gram projectile, driven at 1,012 meters per second, could penetrate 40mm armor at combat range, 30mm at 500 meters. A tungsten carbide variant designated BS-41 offered even greater penetration against hardened steel. The cartridge dictated everything. Degtyaryov's philosophy: build nothing except what physics demanded. Single shot, because magazines added weight and complexity. Bolt action, because semi-automatic mechanisms required machining time the calendar did not permit. The barrel itself would serve as the structural chassis, eliminating a separate receiver. Each deletion represented hours saved in production, grams removed from the soldier's load. The weapon reduced to 5 components: barrel, bolt, shoulder stock, bipod, trigger group. The operator cycled a massive bolt after each shot, feeding cartridges individually by hand. No magazine meant no feed lips to jam, no springs to fatigue, no follower mechanisms to manufacture. Experienced crews managed 8 to 10 rounds per minute against the mechanism's brutal recoil. Broken collarbones were common. The design progressed from concept to production, ready in approximately 2 weeks. The first PTRD-41 rifles reached forward units in late November 1941, manufactured not in established arsenals, but in small workshops across the Urals, facilities previously producing agricultural equipment and commercial hardware. By December 31st, dispersed production delivered 17,700 units, despite operating for only 7 weeks. The 1942 surge raised output to 184,000 rifles, 503 completed daily, each a 17.3-kilogram answer to Degtyaryov's impossible deadline. Built by workers who had never manufactured weapons before the German advance forced their apprenticeship. Temperatures plunged to -35°C in the frozen forests west of Moscow. 2-man teams emerged as the standard deployment, 1 rifleman, 1 loader carrying ammunition tins, positioned in snow trenches 50 to 150 meters from forest edges. The ambush doctrine reversed conventional anti-tank principles. Teams allowed panzer columns to advance past their positions, then fired into 30mm side and rear armor, where tungsten carbide cores achieved penetration. The 346th Division documented this effectiveness in February 1942. Anti-tank rifle units knocked out 4 medium tanks at 300 meters using BS-41 tungsten-cored ammunition, plus 3 armored cars at 200 meters. The engagement distances contradicted pre-war doctrine that had emphasized frontal attacks at close range. The PTRD's versatility extended beyond tank hunting. The 14.5mm rounds penetrated log bunker walls and concrete observation posts that standard infantry weapons couldn't defeat. German tank crews adapted their calculus. Every tree line became a potential threat vector, every copse of birch trees a possible ambush site. The PTRD transformed infantry into tank killers at ranges where supporting machine guns offered limited protection. Radio intercepts from Panzer Group 4 revealed increased fuel consumption as columns avoided forest roads, taking longer routes across open terrain where ambush teams couldn't approach undetected. By February 1942, the PTRD had proven its doctrine. Let armor enter the kill zone, strike from concealment, vanish into winter forests before retaliation arrived. Germany's response came in early 1943. Workshops began welding Schürzen side skirts onto Panzer III and IV hulls. 5mm steel plates mounted 150mm from hull armor, specifically addressing 14.5mm rounds, penetrating side plates at under 300 meters. By March, new production tanks rolled off lines with Schürzen pre-installed. The economic asymmetry was grotesque. Each retrofit added 450 kilograms and 8 to 12 hours of workshop time. Retrofitting roughly 1,400 Eastern Front tanks required over 630 metric tons of steel plate. The Wehrmacht diverted production capacity, rail transport, and field workshops to defend against a weapon the Soviets manufactured for 150 rubles, the cost of binoculars. The 184,000 rifles produced in 1942 represented a fraction of Soviet steel output, yet forced German industry to retrofit its entire armored fleet. The Red Army embedded anti-tank rifles into every rifle division by September 1942. The 62nd Army at Stalingrad fielded 27 divisions, each containing 54 to 81 of the weapons. A single rifle course could deploy over 200 anti-tank rifles across its frontage, creating overlapping kill zones that forced German armor into predictable corridors. When Tiger I tanks arrived at Leningrad and Panthers appeared at Kursk, the PTRD became obsolete against frontal heavy armor. The Tiger's 100mm glacis exceeded penetration at any range. But the war wasn't fought only by Tigers. Soviet battalions shifted to secondary vehicles. SDKFZ, 251 half-tracks protected by just 14.5mm armor. Opel Blitz supply trucks, fuel bowsers, prime movers. These support elements constituted 60 to 70% of German mechanized formations. The weapon that couldn't kill a Tiger could gut the logistics that kept Tigers fighting. The final arithmetic tells the story. Germany produced 1,347 Tiger I tanks. Each required approximately 300,000 man-hours. The Soviet Union built over 400,000 PTRDs. Each took roughly 30 man-hours. Germany built perfection. The Soviets built enough. Operation Bagration, June 1944. Red Army formations with embedded PTRD sections advanced across a 450-kilometer front, engaging half-tracks and reconnaissance vehicles at crossroads and forest junctions as Army Group Center collapsed. The rifles prevented German commanders from consolidating defensive hedgehogs during pocket reductions. 28 divisions destroyed, 350,000 casualties in 5 weeks. The PTRD contributed not through Tiger kills but through systematic degradation of German tactical mobility. The 14.5 by 114mm cartridge outlived its platform. The KPV heavy machine gun adopted it in 1949. Chinese variants fired it at Chosin Reservoir. Vietnamese ZA EPU 4 mounts defended Hanoi against Rolling Thunder. Afghan Mujahideen employed captured systems along the Salong Highway. And in March 2022, the Ukrainian Territorial Defense Forces documented PTRD employment against Russian BMP-2 fighting vehicles near Trostyanets in Sumy Oblast, 81 years after Degtyaryov sketched it on a deadline. In a country losing a war it couldn't afford to lose. The weapon succeeded not through technical sophistication but through relentless adequacy. Simple enough to manufacture under siege conditions, effective enough to justify frontline distribution, durable enough to outlast the regime that commissioned it. The systematic destruction of anti-tank networks that enabled Barbarossa's opening hemorrhage had forced the creation of a weapon so fundamental it required no improvement, only replication. If you enjoyed this, hit subscribe for more World War II deep dives every week. Thanks for watching.